to the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, WRKS, ESPN. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. You can watch the show right now on Facebook. Search the Out of Bounds Show. So we've turned the page on the 4th of July, getting closer to camps opening up with college football and the NFL. So that is exciting. Just a couple of weeks away as we get ready for the 2021 season. And we hope that it is much better and different than the 2020 season. Although we attended a bunch of games, and it was fun, and we plan to do that again. Can't wait to see what shakes out. The SEC, to me, is weird this year. Like, Bama gets the automatic kind of, oh, they'll be fine, even though they've got a new offensive coordinator and a brand-new quarterback with no experience. They'll be fine just because of their talent. And then you just kind of look around and you ask yourself, what do I really have? I know people go to Georgia, but how much do I really trust that? So we welcome in Tom Luginbill on the Modelo guest line. Lugs, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Bo. I'm doing great, buddy.
All right. We were talking earlier. I've been reading the book Peyton and Breeze. It's incredible, behind the scenes on what they went through for 14 years. And it talks about how Breeze had this remarkable mental stamina to handle everything that Sean Payton wanted to do on offense. And Carmichael and Lombardi, the OC and quarterback coach there, I mean, they're quoted throughout the book, and they give you a different perspective. It's really, really cool. And they talk about how they were operating at a PhD level on offense because of what Breeze could process and so on. Now, let me take that down to the college game, and I understand that they don't have 120 hours a week to devote to film study and everything else that's going on. And I know you've been in both buildings, NFL buildings and in college football buildings. But I go to Jimbo Fisher. We're going on year 4. You know, he's the $8 million man. He rode with Kellen Mond for 3 years. They didn't come close to winning the West. They didn't come close to getting through or around or over Alabama. And now they're going to break in. I know they're loaded on D, and that's great. But you got to score this day and age. We can't win 11-9 or whatever, 13-10 anymore, I don't think.
Right.
And so here I am in year 4. As we tick into year 5 and possibly year 6, you know, the man who wants to run this super complex offense, I just wonder where we're headed in College Station as the clock continues to tick. Tom?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's the problem with where Texas A&M is now is they need somebody to take a step back, right? They need Alabama to have a down year, or they need in the same year for LSU and Auburn to both be down, or in the same year for Auburn and Alabama to both be down. And when that happens, they need to be at their best. And that hasn't occurred yet. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. It's hard to close the gap when the other team that has created the gap never takes a step back. And, you know, I see where you're coming from. You got a team that's replacing a quarterback. There's a 4-year starter. They lose 4 to 5 top offensive linemen. They've got tremendous skill. All the components are there. But so, for example, is this the year that maybe because of a change of leadership offensively at Alabama and Bill O'Brien, maybe Bryce Young isn't what everybody's tabbed him to be? Is this the year that all of a sudden Alabama on offense has a 10-point per game reduction and it opens the door? Potentially, but that's the problem. I think Texas A&M has grown and become better as a program under Jimbo Fisher. I think they have become more competitive. They've gotten better players, but they haven't had much help in the conference, and I think that's just the reality of it.
And I think if there's ever a year to go and make hay,
it's this year.
It's this year, Tom, because
– But this is the year they needed Kellen Mond. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
They needed the changeover at Auburn, okay? They needed Alabama's changeover, and if A&M had their quarterback back, now we might be having a different conversation. And you referenced the Breeze and Manning book that I hope I'm saying that correctly, that you've been reading in regards to quarterback aptitude and what Drew Brees was able to accomplish because of his ability to process. Well, that's how 6-foot quarterbacks with marginal athleticism and adequate to good arm strength play for that long in the NFL. That's one thing about Jimbo Fisher, and we've talked about this before. What he asks of the quarterback is highly demanding. And so that would be a concern of mine, because the younger you are and the less experienced you are, sometimes you can blow a fuse if you're handed a bunch on a platter and you're not ready for it. So that's going to be interesting to watch that unfold with A&M this year.
Yeah, I just, a new this would be the year. You're right. If they were in year 2 or 3 with a starter, boy, you could sit there and go, hey, this is an opportunity, because Auburn's in transition. We're not sure really what's going on inside the building at LSU. And then if Bama just takes any kind of slight step back, they're still going to be awesome everywhere. But still, I mean, if Bryce and Bill O'Brien aren't, Sark and Tua, or Sark and Mac Jones or Lane and all those other QBs, you can still get beat in this league, Tom. I mean, I know we don't think Bama can, but they can get, and you don't always have to have necessarily a superstar at quarterback. Gus dinged them a couple of times without, necessarily superstars. I mean, Bo Wallace was a good player, Freeze got him and so on. So, Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. I guess if they're not going to do it this year, and they're not, in my opinion, and then you start getting into year 5 and 6 on this big 75, and it's already gone up from there as far as what he's making per year. I just wonder, what it looks like unless he finds a top 5 or 10 pick in the draft type quarterback, Luke's, that can elevate them past Tuscaloosa to Atlanta.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I want to go back to something you said about Alabama that I think is interesting. It's something that's rare in this profession. We keep talking about their change of leadership and the change at quarterbacks and changes in the offensive line. The reality is, even if it was Sark, there's kind of nowhere to go but down, right? I mean, how do you –
no doubt.
How do you exceed – I don't care if it's Bill O'Brien or Sark or Lane Kiffin. How do you exceed the output last year with the losses that they've had? You're not going to exceed it. There's nowhere to go but down. The question is not having Steve Sarkisian, all right, is that big of a deal as it relates to Bill O'Brien? My dogs seem to think so.
Well, if Auburn is not going to take advantage if Bama slips a little bit, I can't read LSU. I just can't do it. I know they're fantastic personnel wise.
Yeah.
But they've made all these changes for the 3rd year in a row, and I just don't know what I have with Johnson or Brennan. And one of them may be spectacular, but
but you do a little bit. I mean, think about it. With Miles Brennan, the guy threw 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions in the first 3 games of the season before going down against Missouri, where he was playing out of his mind. And then with Max Johnson, the guy started 2 games, threw 8 touchdowns and 1 interception. I mean, I'd take those 2 choices right now. Like he said, you don't have to be exceptional. You don't have to be a complete difference maker. Like, I don't think J.C. Daniels is a difference maker. I think he's competent and competitive, and they're so good around him. Well, isn't that what LSU is? I mean, LSU's got everybody back up front on the offensive and defensive side. Well, Derek Rosenthal obviously transferring, but that might end up being a good thing for LSU. And then they've got a ton of skill. Like, to me, they're as much of a contender to dethrone Bama as Texas A&M is, if we're having the conversation.
Oh, I don't think – oh, yeah, if you made me bet $100, who can challenge Bama? Even at some point during the season, be within a game of them as we go through the conference schedule. Can somebody be 4-1? in late October or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go LSU. I'd go LSU
Right.
over A&M. You know, do I believe Ole Miss has like crazy upset potential? Yes, but now do I think that they can go 8-0 or 7-1, which is what Bama has made you do during this Saban stretch? I think that's too much to ask of Kiffin and Corral, but I think they're capable of beating anybody on their schedule. Does that make sense, Luke?
There's no question. I mean, think about it. This is a team that was, 42-42 in the fourth quarter against Alabama.
Yeah.
With a marginal defense and great offensive skill. So they're going to end up being just fine, in my opinion. I think Ole Miss will show improvement, but they don't have – it's not the frontline starters, Bo. It's the depth. Like, what is the drop-off between your 1 to your 2 and your 2 to your 3? That's where Alabama gets you. That's where an Ohio State, a Clemson, I think you could say LSU and Auburn, depending on the year. Texas A&M starting to get there. It's the ability to be that good in your 2s and 3s when you have to go down the stretch and you're in week 12, 13, 14, 15.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And, you know, for Ole Miss last year, they stayed healthy on the offensive line, Luke. And that O-line was so good. And
But thin.
It was thin.
They didn't get hurt.
Right. And what was so amazing is if Lane wanted to throw it, they threw it. If they wanted to open it up with Ely and gash somebody for, 9 or 10 yards, they did that. And look, they've got a three-headed monster in Jerrion Ely, Henry Parrish, and Snoop Connor, who I think Snoop Connor is like Tony Pollard from Memphis to the Cowboys. I mean, people are sleeping on him. They've got a three-headed monster where when Kiffin needs – we talk about the razzle-dazzle between Corral throwing it down the field, and he is fantastic. But, man, when they want to run the ball, they'll run it down your throat, Tom.
I think that kind of defines what type of team you are. You know, you've always heard that old saying, though, well, we got to be able to run it if we have to. I think that's a false statement. I think you have to be able to run it when you want to.
Yeah.
And that lends to exactly what you just said. We're going to line up. We're going to run it right now. You know it. I know it. The hot dog vendor knows it. The stadium knows it. And you still can't do anything about it.
I want to go back to we were talking A&M and LSU. When LSU won it 2 years ago. All right, so you and I discussed, and I think we agree, that, like, Bama has to slip. And we already know that Auburn's kind of in this weird space, and we don't know what we have with LSU, although everybody loves their personnel. Mm-hmm. And you make a good point on Johnson and Miles playing really well. But when LSU went and got it, Bama didn't take a step back. In other words, they won it on a year where, Bama had – I know Tua went down late, okay, but Bama was rolling, Tom, that year. I mean, they were good,
they were.
Okay? Sark and Tua and all that, they had it going. To me, that's the difference. I mean, LSU can go get – they're not going to go get it every year or every other year, but they have the ability to go get it without Bama taking this pretty big step back for Bama standards, okay? Yet A&M to me, and I think to you, the only way they can go get it and go to Atlanta is for Bama to take this step back, however you define it. Why is that?
I think that is a mental mindset more than it's a physical thing. Because A&M has yet to do it, it kind of turns into just something that's a mental bugaboo, and you can't get over that hurdle. LSU's done it. So they don't look at Alabama maybe the same way that other people do because they've experienced success and they've actually beaten them. And I think that plays a very, very strong role when you're trying to develop a team and you're trying to get over that hurdle. I mean, put it this way, that's no different than when we used to talk about Dabo Swinney and Clemsoning, right?
Yeah.
They'd have these great players that were really, really good. They'd be close. Then down the stretch, they'd falter and they lose to somebody they're not supposed to. And at the time, it was Florida State. It's like, okay, well, they're the big dog. You just couldn't get over that hurdle. And then somehow, some way you do. I actually attribute that Peach Bowl when Clemson beat LSU with Taj Boyd.
Yeah.
as the turning point because they had not beaten a team of that caliber, and it kind of proved to them, okay, we're in with these guys. We can not only play with these guys, we can beat these guys. I think the question you asked, the answer to it is far more mental than anything else.
I think you're right. And I think that both LSU – now, Auburn hasn't gone all the way since 10 or whenever it was with Cam. But
Right.
Auburn and LSU have beaten Bama just enough where they believe they can do it, and A&M doesn't have that belief, that mindset.
Not yet. Not yet. I mean, you have to do that. And
how deflating is it? What you just referenced. Ole Miss in Lane's first year had Bama 42-42 or whatever it was, like you said, in the second half. All right, they're going toe-to-toe for a while. How deflating is that knowing that Ole Miss did that and A&M got smoked last year by Bama?
I know. It is. And you look at the two rosters right now, I think you could compare Ole Miss and A&M on offense easily, but not on defense you can't right now.
No.
And I think Ole Miss will be improved on defense.
Sure.
But still, those two rosters. But again, I also think that, not that Lane has an edge over Jimbo. They both worked under Coach Saban. They know how the dynamic works. But you also had a fresh Lane Kiffin that was intimately involved in the development of the roster that he was competing against, strengths, weaknesses, how, Coach Saban liked to attack or what he'd like to do. And I think he kind of hit that window at the right time.
Yeah. And how much these coaches are, I get it. They get into what they want to do, and nobody in the building's going to tell them what to, like, nobody's going to go up to Jimbo Fisher and say, here's what or it's very rare. But if Jimbo's sitting there watching what Kiffin's doing on offense, and he's already been able to see how Saban has allowed Kiffin, Sark to do all these awesome things, on offense. And he's doing this big, complex, 55-page, thick notebook on the sideline nonsense. I mean, does it ever occur to him that maybe he should tweak a little bit? You think, Tom?
I don't think it does. I don't think it does, and here's why. Because he's won a national championship doing it as an assistant and as a head coach, running that offense. So in his mind, and, obviously at Florida State, that was fairly recently, in his mind, he's doing all the right things too. And listen, there's different ways to skin a cat. There's different offensive approaches, that can get you to championship level football. And his has proven to be able to do so. But are you asking, is he ever going to be willing to commit to going to a true spread with a quarterback runner? I don't think that's ever going to be Jimbo Fisher.
Okay. Well, they're never okay. Now that you walk me through Max Johnson and Miles Brennan, maybe I'm sleeping on LSU.
Well, I'm saying that, and in fairness, I did have their spring game. So I spent a lot of time kind of looking at the ins and outs and the dynamics and, some of the coaching shifts and what they went to. If you look at, Durante Jones, who they hired as the defensive coordinator, he worked for Dave Aranda in Wisconsin. All right. So you're kind of getting back to that familiarity. You look at Jake Peets, who was just the quarterback's coach with Joe Brady and the Carolina Panthers. And Joe Brady literally told Ed Orgeron, if you want to get back to what we were doing, this is the guy you need to hire.
Okay.
So now you get back to that familiarity. Roughly the roster outside of two receivers is the same roster. So there's a lot of arrows pointing up in this trend, if you ask me.
And they avoid Georgia, and they have Florida at home. That ain't bad.
Well, what do I always say about schedule? Who you play, when you play, and where you play.
Yeah. I mean, it's more than manageable all the way through till Florida at home. Florida at home and at Ole Miss.
You think they're going to have that one circled?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, after the dude at Florida threw the shoe,
You know what's amazing about that? The kid for LSU that kicked that 59-yard field goal to win it, The January before that same kid in the Under Armour game kicked a 60-yard field goal.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. Cade York. Can you believe that?
Incredible. I did not know that.
Crazy.
Well, all right. We got about a minute here, but Chris Doring joined us last week. I know Doring's a Florida guy, okay, but I asked him about Florida-Bama.
He's a pretty objective Florida guy.
He is.
I'll tell you that right now.
Look, I think CD does a great job, like you. I mean, and we bring him on, and it's a lot of fun. But Florida's catching Bama early at Florida, and I need this game to be competitive because it just makes it more fun for all of us, right? And I mean, I need it to be competitive late, under 4 minutes to go. Either Emory has the ball or Bryce, and we're all on the edge of our seat, whatever. But he said absolutely, even with all of what Florida's losing, that he expects this game to be competitive, and he thinks that Florida will win the game.
See, I don't know if I'm willing to sit there and say Florida will win the game, but I'm not as frightened by this prospect that Florida's just going to take this huge step back. I don't understand where that's coming from. The guy is too good of a football coach.
Yep.
And he's worked miracles with quarterbacks that were far less talented than Emory Jones.
Yes.
I think you're going to – listen, this is still Florida. They got good players. You could probably make an argument that right now with their losses, as a total top-to-bottom roster, he has better personnel right now at Florida than he had on any one of his best teams at Mississippi State.
No question. No question.
So, I mean, listen, maybe they take a step back. Okay, fine. But, I mean, these guys, this isn't a rec league that's playing in the SEC.
No.
I mean, for crying out loud.
No, and like you said, I'm going with Mullen just because of to be very, very competitive, just because of what kind of coach he is and coaching that position. And you're right. I mean, Mullen's most talented team was 2014, and that team had major holes in it. It was Dak and Dan's ability to kind of, not hocus pocus, but do some pretty cool stuff with that.
Do you remember real quick? I know you got to jump. Do you remember? And I saw you there because I had the game. It was ESPN primetime, Alabama, Mississippi State, Jalen Hurts, and they got Alabama beat. It's over. And Todd Grantham goes cover 0 on the 10-yard line, and Alabama throws a slant to win the game.
Yes.
All you got to do is play the zone, and it's over.
Don't remind me, Luke's. Hey, enjoyed it, buddy. Thank you, man.
All right, bud. Thanks.
Tom Luginbill on the Modelo guest line. Tom Luginbill on the Modelo guest line. The show is brought to you by Modelo. Great beer. Try it. Pick it up at Corner Market in Bellhaven, Corner Market in Fondren, Corner Market on Northside Drive, among other grocery stores and locations. Of course, you can grab it at gas stations, too. We are live in the Bank Plus studio. The show is brought to you by Bank Plus. It's more than a name. It's a promise. Hour number 3 coming up. Parrish Alford, now covering Ole Miss and Mississippi State, will join us at 9:30.